All right, Nathaniel, this is part 3. So the first episode, we talked about semen retention, conscious labor, and intentional suffering. The second episode, we talked about dry fasting, and we got a little bit into, Orthodox spirituality, which is today's episode. So I'm excited to talk about Orthodox spirituality, how the Orthodox view things, their worldview, and ultimately how your consciousness transforms through practicing, the Orthodox tradition. So one of the ways or the salvation process for Orthodoxy is something that I really resonated with, which is purification. And then there's illumination, and then we have theosis. So we have those 3 right there. And I'm excited to talk about those. So my first question is basically going to be, what is that process of salvation? And what is each one, and how have you kind of experienced it, or what is your kind of viewpoint on them?
Okay, so right into the deep end. Okay, so I'm going to start with a caveat, which may be a little bit unexpected. And this is necessary because we don't live in a day and age in which the epistemology, ethos, and praxis, which means practice, of the ancient world is really close to us at all. We live in very much a post-18th century, post-Enlightenment, and now postmodern even world, which is essentially tolerating a whole lot of nonsense and falsehood as normal. So before we delve into something like Orthodox spirituality, it's really important to know what it is not. And we should have some sense of an effective way to come to it. Can you imagine a place that you have to visit, but this place does not exist in our dimension? How are you going to go there? Are you going to buy a bus ticket? You're going to charter a private flight? Is a helicopter going to do anything? No, if it's in another dimension, you ain't getting there the way you get most places you know about getting. And no amount of money can shift that way of transiting, right? If you're a rich dude, you can just buy as many planes as you want. You don't even have to buy a commercial ticket. But this is not that kind of a place that we want to visit, if you will. So before we try to visit some place or sort of indicate the direction toward that place, known as the kingdom of heaven, we have to distinguish that we are talking about something that we ought not to be talking about because we're unworthy of it, A, and B, words don't do it justice much. C, it's quite possible to hear truthful words on an important topic and to not be able to receive them because of, shall we say, the scales covering our eyes or the wax that's in our ears. Let me find a way of getting to this with you.
Yeah,
so
we could. I think
we'll wrap on this for a while. This is going somewhere. So,
yeah.
What is your work? Like, what do you do out there in the world and get paid for it?
I work at a restaurant, and then I have another job too.
Okay, so you're doing some serving. You're doing some specific tasks in a certain place. Yeah?
Yeah.
It's called a restaurant, I suppose. Okay.
Yeah.
So imagine for a moment that somebody came into your restaurant who doesn't speak a word of English, doesn't understand a word of English, doesn't read a word of English. There's still food. There's still a place to sit and eat food, which is probably going to be familiar to the person, even if he doesn't speak English. But his ability to access the experience offered by your restaurant, would you agree, is going to be somewhat hampered if he has absolutely no ability to communicate with you or the menu or anybody else in the restaurant because he doesn't speak a language that lets him do that, right?
Happens all the time. There's so many people. Yeah.
Oh, it's a practical reality. Yeah? This is just life. Now, in the spiritual life, there are, if you will, languages, but they are an all-encompassing way of being. May I ask you, what do you do in the other one? You have a second job.
It's a convenience store. So it's like...
Okay, great. So if you're in a convenience store, it's a very basic sort of a commercial transaction, small scale, right? Mm-hmm. They aren't placing multi-million-dollar orders. They're, $5, candy bars, whatever. There's a certain range of what's handled there, right? Okay, so if somebody comes into your convenience store one day and says this to you, hey, I'm thinking about buying a Rolls Royce. Could you please give me a sales pitch on how I should think about the topic of owning a Rolls Royce? But you're both in a convenience store, and he came to a convenience store to ask that question. Would you say, what are we doing here? Convenience store world? I don't get it. It's kind of random, right? It's like a non sequitur.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of what is normative to Orthodox spirituality and the culture surrounding it is so out of place to an Anglosphere, modern American consciousness that although we both speak English, right, it would be different if I was only fluent in Greek and Russian and we literally couldn't talk. Then you'd just be like, okay, I can't, something happened there, but I just have to vibe it out. I can't talk to him about it, right? But we can speak English, right? So this out of placeness, like the person in the restaurant doesn't speak English, or the convenience store customer who's wanting to know about a Rolls Royce. Most people who are trying to come to Orthodox Christianity are going to utilize an approach that is about that effective. They're going to take an ineffective approach. It doesn't mean that Orthodoxy isn't real or true. It is real and true. It's the ultimate truth. But we don't go to convenience stores to have conversations about purchasing a Rolls Royce. It's helpful if you speak the language of the establishment you wish to patronize. These are basics. Now, so how can we come to it? Well, we have examples in this moment. In other words, there are people groups in the world that are showing us in real time how to come to orthodoxy. And those people that are showing us how to come to orthodoxy en masse in a group sense, we can say, oh, that whole bunch of them, they've absorbed a genuine Orthodox ethos, consciousness, and it's normative in their lives on a collective basis, because this isn't an individual. All of a sudden, we're about to break with Western Anglosphere thought. This ain't an individualist conversation. All of a sudden, it's just not. We're now talking about groups. Almost nobody was ever baptized alone. It does happen. It's in history, it's rare. So I was reading a really interesting academic paper this morning, actually, written by a scholar from the University of Fairbanks. She and her husband went to live in a very, 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 very remote Alaskan village. It's very difficult to get there. For most of the year, the only way to get there is by a seaplane, sometimes by boat. It's way, way, way away from anything that you and I would transact with like a normal situation. So they're living an indigenous life right now. They're living as tribal people up there in the freezing cold of the north. Check this out. They've been Orthodox Christians and nothing else since the 18th century. They're uneducated tribal folks that are entirely Orthodox Christian. They received the Russian missionaries that were sent to them. They don't have Western education. They don't think in terms of economics or politics or anything, philosophy, anything the way that we think about it as educated Westerners. They don't think about it like that, simply because they haven't acquired this disease called being well educated, as we now define it. And so this disease we have exported aggressively. In other words, you can be born and raised in Japan or China, which is not the West, but you can still come in and get educated with a basically Western apostate consciousness. And I mean that as a consciousness that has completely departed from historic Christianity and doesn't even know how to think about it or talk about it, even when it does think about it and talk about it, it's going to do it wrong. So those tribal people up there, and there are some folks in Kenya and the Congo as well, good examples, tribesmen and women who were just able to receive in the simplicity of their pure hearts. Also, they can't read. That helps. Yes, that's an advantage, believe it or not. And this is a very humble, very simple, nigh on impossible way of coming to the faith. But it's the only way that works if you want to be saved. So basically, thank you for inviting us to an improbable at best, most of the time impossible conversation to have.
I would say, based on what you said, then what's like the original view of sin from an Orthodox perspective? Because I've heard like from Orthodoxy that original sin, we don't really inherit it from Adam, even though we have like we have our own sins, but like it's not necessarily inherited from Adam. Is that correct?
Gotcha. Okay, this is a great question. Fortunately, somebody very well written and spoken devoted a 100-page book to answer the question. And but that's a pretty concise answer for this topic. So what you're basically getting at now, I used to be a Protestant, so I can access some of the questions that you're asking in a way that, for example, many Orthodox priests in this country, I live in Greece. There are lots of priests in Greece and in Russia that really wouldn't be able to explain to you a non-Orthodox view because they weren't ever anything other than Orthodox. That doesn't come up. But I was a Protestant. I was an evangelical Protestant. So there is a book that everybody should read who wants the answer to your question. And it's an efficient answer. It's quite compressed, but it's I would say necessary. If you want a good answer, it's called The Ancestral Sin. The ancestral sin, as in the sin of our ancestors, referring to Adam and Eve. And the author is one Father John Romanidis. To sort of break it down into an Orthodox view of this, and then a view which is not Orthodox. We'll call that heterodox. In other words, the Papists, the people that follow somebody named Francis, who lives in a city. So those folks and the Protestants are actually quite close to each other with respect to their soteriology. The difference is this. Orthodox understand that the ancestral sin, that means what Adam and Eve did to violate God's command, did not make us guilty. It did not. It gave us a tendency. So their genes, their genetics were corrupted by their choice. By the way, whatever choices you make alters your DNA, just so you know. And then when you make kids, you shoot exactly that DNA into the babies you make. That's always the way it is from the beginning. So they sinned, which means their DNA, which we have, all of us, now has a tendency to disobey the will of God, to behave, as the Orthodox sometimes say, against nature rather than according to nature. Now, generally speaking, in Western circles, by which I mean euphemistically, in other words, there is nothing really Western about Protestantism or Papism, except for that that's kind of where they occurred. Now Orthodoxy occurs in the West. So when I'm saying Western, I'm not using it so much as points of the compass. What I mean is heterodoxy. I mean by that Protestants, Papists, whatever other species are folks calling themselves Christians and are not Orthodox Christians. So generally speaking, the guilt is thought to be inherited by most of the heterodox. Now, there are varying degrees of intensity of this. Calvinism is a very, very intense species of this. But if you talk to really any Protestant or any Papist, that's the, people that follow the Pope, they're Papists. I don't call them that C word because that refers to us, the Orthodox, the Catholics. That's Us. We're the ones who have inherited the universal faith. Catholic means universal, the only one. So they're using it, but as imposters. Anyway, that's why I don't call them Catholics. I call them Papists. That's what they're called. Anyway, so for both Papists and Protestants, any non-Orthodox expression of Christianity, generally speaking, you will find. And you'd have to ask all of them, but I've asked enough of them. The idea is that the guilt is inherited. Orthodox do not teach that the guilt of Adam and Eve is inherited. The tendency to sin is inherited. But if I go to hell, it will be suffering for my sins. Period. In other words, I'm culpable for my actions. I could never be damned because somebody who lived thousands of years ago ate a piece of fruit that he and she were not supposed to. But their tendency to sin, that I will inherit. And then I will either use my God-given freedom by volition in a way that pleases the Lord, which gives me more freedom, or in a way that doesn't, which makes me a slave to that dark choice and to the one who inspired it, the devil. So that's, I hope, one of the biggest and simplest differences soteriologically. Does that make sense? Inherited guilt versus inherited tendency.
Yeah. See, that would make more sense because, like, a lot of people definitely struggle with that, like, original sin question because it's like, you know, how am I going to pay for someone else's, like, someone else's stuff? You know what I mean?
Precisely. Now, the tendency thing is very, very real. That should not be underestimated. Yeah. I'll give you an example. You've heard of fetal alcohol syndrome?
Explain it.
It's really awful. It's when a mother is an alcoholic and cannot stop drinking while pregnant. It is literally possible. It's been clinically demonstrated. It's possible to be born an alcoholic. That's possible. That's from your mama. Now, does that make it more likely that you're going to grow up and be an alcoholic? Yes, it does. Absolutely does. Does it mean you don't have the freedom to say, no, you still have the freedom? It's going to feel way more difficult. If somebody never tasted chocolate cake in his life, what are the odds he's going to end up addicted to chocolate cake? It's lower, right? It's just lower. And if you got addicted to chocolate cake, then you had a baby, the odds that the baby's going to end up addicted to chocolate cake are higher. They just are. So tendencies are real. We should not underestimate how powerful it is. That little baby born of fetal alcohol syndrome is legit an alcoholic from birth, straight up. Biochemically, addiction, need everything. That's real. But even though we inherit tendencies, it doesn't mean that we're bereft of all freedom because our freedom is ours by nature. In other words, God made us free. He made us in his image. So I can still make a hard choice and say no to a particular sin, the tendency towards which I've inherited. This is very important to know, especially when you're thinking about having kids. Carl Jung explained this pretty well. Basically, if you think there's something that's unresolved inside of you, psychologically, physically, morally, spiritually, whatever it is, you're going to resolve that. Or if you don't, you're going to transmute the need to resolve that to the next generation, and they're going to try to work it out. A simple example. If your father had a desire to be in the Marine Corps, just a dream to be in the Marine Corps, but he never joined up, the odds that you're going to try to join the Marine Corps are just higher. You can do the math, and it's like provable. Because there's some part of you that wants to fulfill the wish that your father didn't fulfill for himself. That is actually genetic. So genetics transmit tendencies. They do not transmit actual guilt. You're guilty or culpable for what you do or do not do, what you say or do not say, what you think or do not think. Because you can sin in thought, you can sin in word, you can sin in action, just like you have a mind, a heart, and a body. But you can't be guilty for something you didn't do. Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm gonna pull up that video clip, but before I pull it up, I think it's also important to, also share like our own personal journeys with or at least, I mean, I'm not Orthodox. I'm in sort of in between state, but obviously you're Orthodox. But so yeah, this video is going to depict the difference between Protestantism and Orthodoxy. And so, at least for me personally, it's like, I mean, I started out with these non-denominational churches, and then I went to like a more of a charismatic scene, speaking in tongues, seeing all this miracle signs and wonders, things like that, and even myself performing it. And then for some reason, I was led to like basically the dark night of the soul, and I realized like a lot of this stuff is, I mean, not really important. So then I started looking into Orthodoxy from that point, and I started looking into like the lives of the saints, just super interesting, just like their struggles and like the Desert Fathers and things like that, their quotes. And there's such a rich, tradition with, I mean, there's just certain quotes that I take from them and still like meditate on, like sit in your cell, it will teach you everything. I forgot he's like Moses is his last name. I forgot what was his title.
Yep. But, Saint Moses the Ethiopian. Yep.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of it, but I can't think of it right now. But I'm curious to hear, like, from your personal experience, like, what is it like? What was it like transitioning? What are some things that you saw? The difference you saw between Orthodoxy and the other sort of, I guess you say, because Orthodox is ecumenism, right? Or they have like an ecumenistic belief. So like they believe that they're the true church, and other churches are, like, I don't know the word for that, but other churches are, you can fill that in.
Well, you're opening up some really good territory, but let me just jump in on one of the things that you said, because it is the right starting point. And what you said is lives of the saints. That's the right place to start. That's the right place. And why? You see, those are people who, in the body, on the earth, entered into theosis, which is to say they entered into union with God. They entered into union with God so profoundly that it would not be wrong to say that they became God. Not by nature, only God is God by nature. But to become God by grace is the destiny of every man born. In other words, we were made for union with God. It doesn't mean everyone born will achieve this or be given this gift, but it does mean that's what we're made for as a species. Uniquely as a species, we are designed to enter into intimate union with God. So the lives of the saints, very simply, the lives, literally the biographies of people who in the body entered into mystical union with God. That's what that is. And when you read the lives of the saints, you start to catch things. Also, one thing, they know you're reading about them. It's not dead. If you read the life of a saint, before we talked a couple hours ago, I was reading the life of Saint Ioannicius the Great, because he said this beautiful short prayer: my hope is the Father, my refuge is the Son, my protection is the Holy Ghost. And that's a beautiful prayer. We still use that. And he's the one who appears to have come up with it. Can do that. Saints do that. And just as I was reading his life, I was just having my heart warmed by his example. This is a man who attained such heights of holiness as walking on water like the Lord himself. He would float off the ground when he prayed. He was given dominion over the elements like Christ because he was united to Christ. And so, but he still lived here on the earth, just like Christ lived here on the earth, in a body, real man. And so lives of the saints, that would be my one suggestion to anybody who feels interested in Orthodox Christianity is, forgive me for this, because it might be a little offensive. Put away your Bible, pick up the lives of the saints. You ain't ready for the Bible. If you were in the early church, most of it would have been off limits to you. Seriously, they did not mess around with this. They did not mess around. Off limits, inappropriate. You won't do anything God-pleasing with it. It's not for you. Now, I'm being a little aggressive more than I would ordinarily be, simply because I'm speaking against the spirit of our times. That's where there's some intensity to me here. I'm speaking against the spirit of our times. Now, thanks be to God that Protestants read the Bible. Thanks be to God there are people who are biblically literate who are Orthodox Christians. The saints acquire biblical literacy a variety of ways. Studying the scriptures is one way. St. Mary of Egypt, however, could quote vast portions of the Bible, and she couldn't read. It's because she became one with God the Holy Ghost, who wrote the scriptures. So the scriptures would just come out of her mouth, word for word. Vast portions of it that she'd never read, because she was united to. So, starting place, if you're interested in Orthodoxy, by the way, this also applies to people that are already baptized Orthodox. Read the Lives of the Saints.
Yeah, so if I was like coming from obviously a Orthodox perspective, I'll say that's pretty heretical what you just said, because this is the word of God, this is the authority, like this is what you have to base your truth on. So like, what would you say to that if somebody's like, well, that's wrong because the Bible says this is the word of God, or I don't know, especially that quote.
It is the word of God.
But that's where you have to get your main source of truth from, not in the Lives of Saints, because that's what they'll say. Lives of Saints, you don't read from them. They'll believe that they're dead, for example.
Here's the Orthodox tradition on this, and I can just express, because you're asking me about Orthodoxy, now in this conversation, my duty shifts a bit. If you're asking me about Orthodoxy, I have to simply say what it is as it's been given to me. And if I say something that departs from that, I'll try to acknowledge it, that now I'm giving an opinion. But in this case, this isn't my opinion. This is actually the teaching of the church. The Lives of the Saints are for beginners. The writings of the Holy Fathers are for the advanced. The scriptures are for the perfect. What this means is what you will be able to understand. When you will be able to understand the scriptures is when you're united to Christ, when you're one with God the Holy Ghost. Because he wrote the text, he wrote the scriptures. God breathed. When you have been united to Christ in this manner, and this means perfect is the state of theosis. That's what that means. These are the 3 degrees. It doesn't mean you shouldn't read your Bible. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is, if I gave you a textbook on linear algebra, do you know what linear algebra is?
Yeah.
It's very advanced mathematics. You don't do linear algebra in high school. It's not algebra. Talk about linear algebra. Are you a math major in college?
No.
Okay, you don't know what linear algebra is. I promise you. You have no idea. Unless you're advanced. Unless you're like a really advanced math person, you might actually.
Sounds familiar.
Okay, so when you do algebra in school, that's not linear algebra. Linear algebra is something you do if you're a math major, and it's way after calculus. It's hard. It's really, really hard. Now, I could have a linear algebra text delivered to your house via Amazon. You'll be staring at linear algebra. If you didn't know arithmetic, if you didn't know things like long division, multiplication, fractions, basic algebra, and calculus, if you didn't have all that and you were fluent in all that, linear algebra is going to be like, that's how much sense you're going to make of it. Now, we could give you the textbook. You could even be in English. It's going to... Isn't that good? So if you can't count and then you go to linear algebra, we can put the textbook in your hand, but we can't trust you to do anything worthwhile with that text because you can't count to 9 yet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That has to come before you get to advanced mathematics, right? It just does. Now, there's always the action of divine grace that we must sort of acknowledge in all humility. In other words, the Lord is capable of enlightening and illuminating who he will. And how he does that in myriad ways.